All right, welcome back to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. Jason, how's it going today?
Doing all right, just bearing the New England cold. Yeah, it's a little bit better today, but
Today
past couple days have been kind of bad.
today is nice. Today was in the 50s and my mom actually had to wait outside for like 90 minutes to get COVID tested for her job. And like
Yeah.
she's just like it was brutal and she's like and I was like, "Well, mom, like, it could have been worse. It's kind of nice today." And she's like, "It's still in the 40s, blah blah blah." But yeah, it's been nasty out there, but wherever you are, I hope the weather's nicer. It could be worse. I don't know where everyone is listening from, but so today, what we're doing on the show is an idea that I came up with about a month ago, and that's basically we're going to be doing a draft. And what we've done is we've come up with a list of 19. I picked it at random. I don't know why the number is 19. I probably should have added somebody and made it 20, but we got 19 WWE, what I've classified as WWE undercard names. And what we're looking at with the undercard names, and basically my methodology for picking these guys was I was looking for people who were on WWE's main roster who are essentially directionless, who don't really get put into storylines, who don't really have a real gimmick, who haven't really gotten pushed at all lately. And it's kind of a vague definition of names, but I wanted to just kind of look at people who aren't really used or seen as that significant on WWE programming and examine their potential and examine their uh what kind of go over what's gone wrong for them. Why have they been in this position where they have not been pushed to a certain degree? And so so what we're going to do here is me and Jason are going to be have our brands, our separate brands, and we're going to take turns picking talent. So we'll start with yeah, I'll flip a coin. I've got the coin right here, and we'll take turns picking our first round pick, second round pick, third round pick until we make our way through all of the names. Um,
Yeah,
and just
I think that's an important thing to preface too, is that we're not picking like the names you picked, we're not picking from guys that are have bad booking. Like Retribution has very bad booking, but at least they have something to do.
yes,
They have at least. It's bad, but at least it's better than what these guys have.
yeah, there are people on here who are being booked poorly, but I like for instance, I didn't put any retribution on there because they're at least on the show most weeks, and some of these guys are on the show. It's kind of a varying degree. I'm just gonna read off the names right now so people know who we're talking about. And I posted this on Twitter the other day. So, but the names we have here, and I'm going in alphabetical order, are Akira Tozawa, who, now that I think about it, he might just be called Tazawa. I don't know if he's lost his first name, but he's alphabetically on my list as Akira Tozawa. We got Apollo Cruz, Arturo Huas, Bo Dallas, Cesaro, Chad Gable, Dabakato, Drew Gulak, Grand Metalik, Humberto Carrillo, Jinder Mahal, Kalisto, Lindsay Dorado, Mojo Rowley, Ricochet, Riddick Moss, Robert Roode, Titus O'Neil, and Tucker. So that's the list. And like you said, there's a big difference, I think, between like Ricochet and Cesaro and Arturo Huas as far as how frequently you see them. But I think they all kind of fall into the category of guys who don't really get that much direction from WWE. And I didn't want to include the women, and basically the reason for that was I just thought there was too much fluidity between like the top of the card in WWE in the women's division and the bottom part of the card. I think people bounce around so much that it's really hard to say someone's out of it. For instance, like Carmella really wasn't doing anything in WWE, and she was off television, and she just comes back and she's like basically immediately the number one contender. I don't think like Riddick Moss is going to show up and he's going to be like like challenging Drew McIntyre at the pay per view. It's just a kind of a different scope. There are women on the roster who don't get a lot of direction that could be used in this draft that we could do, but I just kind of wanted to keep it simple. I didn't really take any. Some of these people are sometimes in tag teams, but I didn't want to take any tag team division people either because for similar reasons, you can kind of just become the number one contender in the tag team division with very little notice. And I also didn't want to include NXT just because it's kind of unfair in NXT. I know there's a debate about whether NXT is developmental or not, or what it really is. But in NXT, people are just getting their start in wrestling, and they might need a lot of time before they can kind of get pushed. I think when it comes to when someone comes up to the main roster, you hope that they're quote unquote main roster ready, and that they should be ready to receive a push in some way. Anyway, so I've got the coin, Jace. I will flip it. I'm counting on Jason and everyone at home to trust that I am being very fair with this coin. It's not a trick coin. But Jason, do you want heads or tails?
Give me tail.
Okay, Jason has tails. So I'm just going to flip it. I'll just throw it in the air. Thank God I didn't drop it. That would have been bad. And then I'll flip it like a NFL referee. And it is heads. So I will have the first draft pick. And I'll be picking draft. And it's also the WWE draft. So like I'm like Raw and I get 2 picks and you get 1 pick. Okay. No, just kidding. Okay. That's not how we're doing it. But I got 3 hours to fill. No, we don't have. I'm not. I thought about like I thought if I had more time and I was more digitally savvy, I'd have like a graphic up for everyone to see like who we have, and I would have named my brand something like but I didn't think that much about it. This is really just an excuse for us to kind of talk about some people in the WWE roster who aren't always used appropriately. So with my number 1 overall pick, we tanked last year so I could get the number 1 overall pick for me to get this franchise altering player. I'm going with Ricochet, and I think the argument for me for Ricochet being the number 1 overall pick is that I have seen Ricochet in many, many different wrestling promotions. I first saw him when he was just, he was in Chikara and he was on the Indies, and then saw him in Dragon Gate, saw him in New Japan, saw him in Evolve, saw him in NXT, saw him on Lucha Underground, and the guy always got over. He got over everywhere. He always came across like a star. He was someone that countless numbers of bookers and decision makers and fans all saw and said, that guy is a star. And for some reason, when he's been on the main roster, and this goes to show, kind of the epitome of what WWE's problems are, is that they have found somebody who literally everywhere he has worked has gotten over, and every fan base that he has entertained before coming to WWE's main roster has said, that guy's amazing, and turned him into a guy who's just meh, just another guy on the roster. He loses matches to Slapjack. He's just not that. He's so. I think I have the track record there with Ricochet is clearly a guy who should be a super duper star, and he just isn't in WWE. Jason, what are your thoughts about Ricochet going number 1?
Yeah, I mean, every time I see Ricochet in WWE, I always just want a palate cleanser and just put up his stuff in New Japan, a New Japan World. His like match with Kota Ibushi for the junior title is so good. It just shows his potential. Of course, Lucha Underground, it showed he can play different characters. Obviously, he had Conan with him as a mic piece, but still, like, even NXT, he got better on the mic. He got more confident. And so it showed like, okay, this guy can actually, be good on the mic and have actual character instead of just rely on his, his crazy moves, which is very good. But obviously, you need a little bit more for that. But he did show that in NXT. And, just had one of those things. It's just he got called up to the main roster. He got paired up with Aleister Black. They were a tag team. They have no history of being a tag team. But, okay, maybe, this is just their way of putting guys over. It obviously didn't end up being that way. And, Ricochet, he's just kind of around. You can make a case he could be in the Hurt Business with Cedric Alexander. But then at the same time, it's like they're kind of filling the same role. And so that doesn't really fit him as well. And so it's really hard, especially in Vince McMahon's mind, to find a place for him on the Raw SmackDown.
Yeah, I mean, you could see it coming. Like, it wasn't, even though it's one of those things where even though everyone kind of agreed that Ricochet was a great talent, him like kind of flopping on the main roster and not getting the kind of push that he probably deserved was not surprising. It just, we know the history of Vince McMahon. We know guys that physically look like Ricochet don't always have the best chance of getting over when Vince is the key decision maker. And, the problem with the main roster is it does color people's opinions on these talent. There are people out there that think that Ricochet is just like uncharismatic and that's why he's not over. And it doesn't matter how many flips he does. And it's like, and I urge any of those people to go back and watch anywhere else. I'm not just saying he was over, on, at Evolve shows and there was 200 people there or whatever. We're talking about a guy that was over in New Japan. We're talking about a guy that was over in Lucha Underground when he wasn't even allowed to use his real name. He had a totally different gimmick, but was essentially the same performer. He was over in NXT, which is largely the same fans that are watching WWE television. So he's got this long track record of being able to get over anywhere. And there are a few people on this list who I can say also, have gotten over in other places and have looked good, and therefore theoretically in my hypothetical wrestling promotion could get over there. But Ricochet to me, because he's still pretty young and because he's still, has shown that ability to get over, he's the number one pick for me. And one of the interesting things about Ricochet is that he did kind of get a push when he got called up to the main roster, but he got like the bad kind of push that WWE gives guys. They kind of repackaged them, but not in a cool way. And then he had the match with Brock Lesnar in Saudi Arabia, which was the classic, like, oh, don't worry, he's really gonna get over because he's getting a world title match with Brock, and then he just gets annihilated by Brock, which really hurt his credibility. And then he was just basically been the guy who he does appear on Raw pretty regularly, which not a lot. Some of these guys on this list cannot say they do, but he hasn't gotten the same kind of direction push. He's not really. He's in like a story. I guess he is in a storyline with the Hurt Business, but does it feel like that storyline has any direction whatsoever, or it's just like a segment that they roll out week after week after week to show to fill time? I think it's been a real disappointing run for him, and he's my number one pick. So unless Jason, you have more comments about Ricochet,
No, I just hope, hopefully things change. Hopefully it's just one of those where like, oh, he has to pay his dues before he actually gets something. Hopefully it's just one of those dumb things.
Well, he said he said something interesting on Twitter like a month or two ago where someone said like, oh, I wish WWE would use Ricochet better. Ricochet deserves better. And he responded by saying like, oh, I just need to be better. It's on me. And that's like kind of like the selfless kind of response you would want your employee to say, which would be like, you hold yourself accountable and say, you know what, things are going poorly for me because I'm not working hard enough and I'm not doing any of that. But as an objective observer, I'd be like, no, Ricochet, you're great. You're fine. It's, the company needs a better job to maximize your skills that they're not doing. And I think, if he went somewhere else, I think he'd be much more successful. And when I say somewhere else, I mean pretty much anywhere else. I think he'd be more successful if he went back to Japan, if he went to AEW, if he went to Impact, if he went to Ring of Honor, if he went to go work in Mexico full time. I think he'd be very, very, very successful. And I think WWE is the one place where he really cannot be that allowed. But anyway, so Jason, you have the number 2 overall pick. So let me know who you're taking.
All right. So for number 2, I'm taking Cesaro. Ooh. And so obviously Cesaro, formerly known as Antonio Cesaro, way back when, as we all remember, he's had an interesting WWE career. Like, he's been in the company for a lot longer than I think people realize. Like, he was around when Jack Swagger was around. We had that, he was part of that faction, that weird libertarian faction with the We the People gimmick and all that. He was paired with Zeb Coulter.
Yeah, I mean, he just kind of predates like NXT. Like, let me see when he was signed here. He has been around for a while. No, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, basically, he was around before NXT, and so he never really, he's always part of, like, that other developmental system going on there. But yeah, he was former U.S. champion, and from the Indies, obviously as Claudio Castagnoli. Obviously, most people know him from, the Kings of Wrestling with Chris Hero. He was much a tag team specialist. He was always a great worker. Even Ring of Honor, he was a great worker, and so. WWE has realized that because they always put him in good tag teams with Tyson Kidd, obviously. Like, I loved that tag team. I didn't expect them to be great of a pair because it seemed random, but it really worked, especially with Natalia as their third person. And as of right now, he was part of a tag team again with Shinsuke, and that was fun. But still, again, as he's the reason why he's on this list, it's directionless. They don't really know what to do with him. They don't really feel like they want to put him in the world title scene, but they also want to keep him around because obviously if he left, he'd be a bigger Like he's very charismatic. He's on Twitch. He's a very good personality as you've seen on not only his Twitch channel but also Up Down Down. Like he has a lot of personality. He's a great businessman as well. He's selling his own coffee, and so like this is like the perfect WWE guy in all these qualities. But yet WWE doesn't see that, and they also don't. They also kind of see it because they're not letting him go anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean they've never gone all the way with him,
Mm-hmm.
and they've teased him. He had that whole run with Paul Heyman. He
Oh
had the
yeah.
run. Yeah, he did. I mean, it
Oh
was like
my
when
god.
Brock was gone, but they wanted Heyman to still be on television, so they just paired him with Cesaro, which was a good fit. But they, even though when he had Heyman, he was still basically a mid card guy, and they've thrown him in, they've given him a title shot here and there, but he's always been just kind of a mid card guy, and they've never wanted to pull the trigger with him. I mean, when they paired him with Heyman, the natural inclination was like, oh, Cesaro will feud with Brock Lesnar at one point, and he really didn't. Like he never got that push. He never got a serious world title push. Not even like really. I'm trying to think if he ever main evented like a pay per view challenging for the world title. I assume he's challenged for the world title like on episodes of SmackDown or Raw, but I don't know if he's ever actually like he ever like main evented like I don't know like Backlash or something and he challenged John Cena. That might have happened. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
If
he's
he
just
did, it was probably a multi-man thing.
yeah. Oh, that's probably true. Um, I think the knock I think a lot of people have on him is that they think he's not charismatic. But I find him to be pretty charismatic. He might not be the guy you put, in the ring and give him a microphone and he's got to cut a 15-minute monologue, but most people aren't like that. I mean, you touched on it, Jason, talking kind of about like his Twitch streaming. He's got like kind of like the coffee. It's not a gimmick, but it kind of is like a gimmick
Yeah.
where he's selling coffee. I think he has more charisma than people give him credit for.
I mean, definitely. And, I mean, the beach ball scene, like he literally went into the crowd, grabbed a beach ball, and just ripped it off because the crowd was just not caring
Yeah,
about
that's
their
great.
match.
That's great.
But then WWE didn't do anything with it. They're just like, oh, like don't pay attention to the crowd, don't just keep working. And it's like, no, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to
Yeah.
react to the crowd.
Yeah, that's old school, and he checks off a lot of the boxes that you would think WWE likes. He's tall, he's got a good physique, he's crazy strong, he's really athletic, and he's just a great worker. God, like I always when I think of Cesaro, I always think like, man, would I like to see that guy in the G1? Give me
Oh
10
yeah.
good Cesaro matches, where he just is allowed to go all out. And you know, every a couple times a year they will like let Cesaro have like an incredible match on SmackDown or Raw. Like he'll just wrestle like, okay, you're gonna have like a 15-minute match with Daniel Bryan, or you're gonna
Hmm.
have like a 15-minute match with Sami Zayn or someone else who can really work at his level, and it's just awesome. And everyone's like, God damn, Cesaro's a great worker. I think, you know, I don't know if there's a better worker in that company than Cesaro, and he's not always put into the position to show that. It does seem like most of his career is like, what are we going to do with this guy? Let's just put him in a tag team. And he's had a lot of random tag team partners over the years. And I would say, like, he had the tag team with Tyson Kidd that worked out. He had the tag team with Sheamus, the bar,
Yeah.
that worked a lot. I mean, let's see. I'm just looking at his titles here. He's won the Raw Tag Team Championship 5 times, 4 times with Sheamus, and once with Tyson Kidd. And he's run the SmackDown Championships once with Sheamus, and then of course once with Shinsuke Nakamura. So he's a 7-time tag champion. But I guess the bar was like a multi-year thing. But he doesn't really feel like when you think of him, you don't think of like, oh yeah, like one of those great tag team wrestlers. And that's because he's kind of just rotated between different people. But let me ask you, did you have him number one or did you have Ricochet at one?
I had Ricochet at one. I think the only thing that holds Cesaro is his age. He's
Yeah.
39 years old. I know AJ is like 40 plus, but still, like, I think that's just a different level. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why they've been hesitant, especially now, to push him because he is a bit older right now,
Yeah,
and I
he's
don't know if they
39.
want to push that guy that old.
Yeah, I mean that's going to factor in. My pick coming up is age is a factor in their pick as well. But the last thing on Cesaro is that do you remember when he got like the giant swing over and they basically, the report was that WWE told him not to do it because he's a
Yeah.
heel and heels aren't supposed to get that kind of stuff. You shouldn't have a move that should get him that the fans should cheer if you're a heel. Um, and God forbid a guy gets a move over that the fans want to see that he can do to anybody. It just, it's that kind of backwards thinking, and that's why people like Cesaro have been stunted and why they're on this list. So my second overall pick, so round two, pick one, or third overall, my power rankings is I'm going with Robert Roode. And this is kind of similar to the Ricochet pick in the extent that we have seen Robert Roode pushed as a main event star. We have seen him, both as a babyface and a heel, what it's like for Robert Roode to be your world champion. And he's been very good. I mean, he was a highlight for Impact for a long time when Impact did not have a lot going for it, where Robert Roode was kind of the one guy you could put out there and say, that guy's a main eventer, that guy feels like a star. Um, good body, great charisma, very good worker, could be heel, could be babyface. Really has done a lot. When he came into NXT, he was immediately successful in NXT. And he came up to the main roster, and it's kind of like a similar thing to Cesaro, where he's everyone acknowledges that he's good, and that everyone acknowledges that he's a talented guy, but he doesn't really get a lot of direction. So he kind of gets put into tag teams, and that's just kind of a safe place for him to be because it gets him on the show and allows him to work with to other talent that might need a good worker to work against to learn from. But it keeps him from being a main eventer, and I think that most people who have followed Robert Roode's career would accept that he's a main event guy, and if he were to come up from NXT, get a main event push, and challenge for titles and stuff like that, I think he would hang. He'd feel right in the role because we've seen him do it before.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that hurt him was also benefited NXT was his theme song. Like his theme song was super over in NXT. Then it's obvious that Vince McMahon, he only saw the theme song in Robert Roode, not Robert Roode, the worker or the talent, whatever you want to call it. It was clear Vince McMahon, and he saw that theme song was over. He thought, probably in his weird humor, he thought it was hilarious that, like, oh, this is all funny. He says glorious all the time. Oh, that's hilarious. It's good shit. Like you could see Vince McMahon saying that.
Yeah.
And it hurt him because that defined his character. He was nothing else. He's the guy in his bathrobe all the time, saying glorious. That was the big thing, that the weird disconnect between the main roster and NXT. Like in NXT, Robert, he was wearing all these suits. He looked like $1 million. But then in the main roster, all he wore was that same robe, even when he wasn't wrestling. It made no sense for his character, but it was just something probably Vince really liked.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If you're gonna wear like the Ric Flair robe, like you kind of have to be a star.
Yeah.
To otherwise you kind of look ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
You look like you're playing dress up as a wrestler. Like you're like one of those people. I think one of those people who like buys the Ric Flair robe online for like $10,000 and then like walks around their house with it. So that hurts him, and I think he's 43, so this is it for him, really. I don't see and unfortunately for a lot of these guys, these guys, who are on this draft, some of these guys are new to the company, relatively speaking, but a lot of these guys have been around forever, and it does seem like kind of their book has been written, and that we're not going to wake up. Vince isn't going to just suddenly wake up and push Robert Roode, and Bobby Roode's going to be, challenging Roman Reigns for the title. That ship has sailed, and it's unfortunate, but I think if I was starting a wrestling company, I would want Robert Roode on my team. So I'm gonna pass it off to you, Jason. Who's your next pick?
All right, my next pick is Drew Gulak. And
okay.
So Drew Gulak, he's relatively young. He's like 32, 33-ish. So he still has a lot of miles left ahead of him. And obviously he's one of those 205 Live guys. And I think that just speaks for itself because 205 Live was destined to fail from the moment it was announced because remembers it was taped. It was literally live after SmackDown, and no one gave a damn about it. Like I remember going to a live SmackDown show and 205 Live was on. I was one of the few people looking forward to it
Yeah.
because people I liked. But then I remember this kid, he wasn't paying attention, and then another person, hey kid, pay attention to the show. And he's like, oh, those aren't real wrestlers. I'm
Oh
like,
boy.
wow, that really says a lot about how people see 205 Live.
And
Like they're
and
not real wrestlers.
and you leaned over the railing and berated them about Drew Gulak's prestigious independent career, correct?
Uh,
No.
well, what I want to be nice.
Yeah, no,
I
I
want to
know,
have
I
good
know.
stuff.
That's
But yes, in my mind, yes. So like no,
he's just burst in
Drew
like
Gulak is amazing.
you gotta burst in like this like the smart version of the Kool-Aid Man and just be like, oh, you didn't know about Drew Gulak's excellent work in CZW. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean Gulak, I have him high on my list. I didn't have him I think quite as high as you, but I think he showed a lot, when he was doing the PowerPoints and stuff. But this guy,
Exactly.
he's got a charisma, and that's I think something that hasn't really been. It has been utilized. I think to an extent, Vince and WWE do understand that they can do stuff with this guy, but he's never been pushed as a serious wrestler.
Yeah, and definitely with like like even this year with his storyline of Daniel Bryan, like that was a really good story, and it looked like Daniel Gulak's getting a push. He's getting the rub from Daniel Bryan. And after that, nothing happened from that. Daniel Bryan's moving on to different things, and Drew Gulak was just kind of left to devices. But he showed in his matches with Daniel Bryan, like, oh, this guy's really good. He makes that technical style like really entertaining in that Zack Sabre Jr. kind of way, but a little more subtle than Zack Sabre Jr. And then like just those are my favorite my favorite style of wrestling, that technical style of wrestling. And Drew Gulak, just because he's a veteran, he's done that style this whole entire indie career in CZW, Evolve, Dragon Gate USA, all those promotions. Like he is such a great technical wrestler, and it's disappointing because I don't think Vince likes that kind of style, and that's probably another reason why he's hesitated getting pushed that often.
Yeah, and like going back to like the 205 Live, what was his thing in 205 Live? Was it like the no fly zone?
Yep.
Was that what it was called? Yeah. And like to me with Gulak, like I knew Gulak was, and this is something you see in WWE, a positive that you might not see in the independents. When they signed Gulak to 205 Live, or was he? I'm trying to think if he was part of the Cruiserweight Classic. I
He
feel like he
was. Yep.
was. Um, when they signed him, I was like, okay, he's really good in the indies. He's a good worker. He's the kind of guy you want to have in the division. But I really didn't know he was this charismatic. And when he come on and he did the no fly zone gimmick and he did the PowerPoint presentations, I was like, this guy's got real personality and he can talk. And I'm like, the sky's the limit for him now because I know he's a good worker, but he's got good charisma. He can talk. He can kind of get over if he was given the right push. And I think the thing with the Daniel Bryan thing is it was clear that Daniel Bryan wanted to help him. It was clear that Daniel Bryan, this is a guy I want to work with because I think he's good and I want to get him on television and I'll do stuff for him. I'll sell for him and whatever. But after, they moved on with that, no one, that was like basically a favor Daniel Bryan did for him, but still nobody else in the company sees what Bryan saw in him, and he's just kind of been gone by the wayside.
Yeah, and even talk more about that no fly zone gimmick in 205 Live, like the way Drew Gulak was selling top rope moves, like he was a little shaky ropes when he was on the top rope, like that was so perfect and so subtle. Like I don't think not many wrestlers can actually sell, pretending to be shaky on a top rope. Like it's so
and not
brilliant,
like the
so
cartoons,
subtle, and
not the cartoon selling.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the uncomfortable. He's uncomfortable at the top rope, but he's not afraid of heights, which we've seen that gimmick before.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's great. So, so you got Gulak, so that will allow me. I will keep it in the G family, and I'm going with Chad Gable as my pick. And Gable's the first person, right, on this list that didn't wrestle anywhere else before WWE. And I've kind of been leaning on like looking at guys and how successful they were outside of WWE to determine, how comfortable I'd be if I wanted them in my promotion because I know what they can do outside of the WWE atmosphere. Gable's, trained by WWE and we haven't seen him anywhere else. But that almost makes him more intriguing because I think it's clear that Chad Gable's really talented, that he took to wrestling really quickly. He's a great athlete. He's a good worker. He's got some charisma. Once American Alpha broke up on the main roster and they, did the crazy Jason Jordan angle, and then Jason Jordan's career, unfortunately, looks like it's over. For real, some of these guys' careers are figuratively over, but Jason Jordan's career is literally over. But Chad Gable, you know, he's been completely disrespected on the main roster. He's been given pushes that were designed to essentially embarrass him or to entertain Vince or both. And he's just a guy who you could easily see if he went to New Japan or AEW or Impact or any other wrestling promotion on God's green earth. He'd probably be pushed and he'd probably really succeed. And that makes him intriguing, It makes him intriguing because we don't know the mystery of out there. He could suck. He could be someone who doesn't know how to work outside of WWE's style. I can't say he knows for a fact because we've never seen him, but I feel pretty confident in that he'd be very good. And obviously the booking in WWE has done him no favors.
Yeah, I believe he's a Gerald Briscoe guy, obviously coming from the wrestling background.
Yeah.
He's trained for the Olympics. I don't remember if he actually was in the Olympics.
He was.
But he's like an Olympic.
I think he was in the Olympics. He competed at the 2012 Summer Olympics in London. Let me just pull that up there.
But still, that's pretty crazy. Like Vince McMahon, this very patriotic sort of guy would not push that even more. Like this guy represented our country. The Olympics, and you would think that would be something he would be very much in on. Obviously, the Kurt Angle parallels were there, especially during the Jason Jordan angle. Would Chad Gable have benefited from being a Kurt Angle son instead of Jason Jordan? Maybe, but it's still that storyline for Jason didn't really help Jason Jordan that much. So I don't know if it would help Chad Gable instead.
No, it killed Jason. It killed Jason Jordan. If you remember that angle, like that was like the angle was like. Now, maybe it was ultimately going somewhere really interesting, but it was basically like Jason Jordan kept letting Kurt Angle down, and like Jason Jordan would like burst into tears because he like lost a match for his father.
Yeah, so I don't know if that would
feels like that was a million. Feels like that was a million years ago. I don't think it would have helped Chad Gable at all. Chad Gable did wrestle in the Olympics, according to Wikipedia, competing in the 2012 Summer Olympics, completing in Greco-Roman style in the 84 kilogram division. He first defeated Kitani Graham from the Federated States of Micronesia in the qualification round, and then he was eliminated in the next round by Pablo Shori of Cuba, losing 3-0. But that's a big accomplishment, just making the Olympics and actually wrestling in the Olympics. There's a lot of really good amateur wrestlers in the history of professional wrestling. There are some that have made it to the Olympics. Obviously, Kurt Angle's, Kurt Angle won the gold medal in amateur wrestling. I was going to say he's professional wrestling's only Olympic gold medalist, but that's not true. But obviously it's a big accomplishment, independent, but because he was so successful as an amateur wrestler and he got into wrestling kind of later, he is 34, which isn't, ancient or anything like that, but it is older than I think some people would think. They think of him as probably being a young guy and stuff like that. And he looks younger than he probably is, but I mean, he's small, he's short. I don't know if you knew this, Jason, but Chad Gable is short.
Yes.
And God, what really killed the Shorty G gimmick was the outfit was so bad.
And
it was like, you have this guy who is a badass amateur wrestler. You just put him in the singlet. That's the history of amateur wrestlers in professional wrestling. You put him in this, what you would see at like the YMCA morning basketball run, where he's wearing like Target shorts and Target tank top, and it's highlighter green, and that just killed him. He's got terrible outfit choice, in addition to just his name being fucking Shorty G, which is another key problem him getting over. So
also feuding with Baron Corbin didn't help. Like, I know Baron Corbin, he likes to go on Twitter saying, "Oh, you don't know what makes a true heel" and all that stuff. But
don't get me started.
But I'll just say this. Baron Corbin, what makes a good heel? You put the baby face over, and you make him more over. You didn't make Chad Gable more over in their feud. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, he didn't help him get over, and there's a difference between people not wanting to see you and getting real heat that eventually can be transferred over to a baby face. But yeah, so that's the sad fate of Chad Gable. It's unfortunately these career assessments and these wrap-ups are not going to get better. They're going to get worse as we move further down this list. So who do you got next?
So my third guy is Apollo Crews. And so Apollo Crews, obviously, like Ricochet, he was part of that Hurt Business storyline as well. Obviously didn't go anywhere because Hurt Business have moved on to other bigger, better things. But still, Apollo Crews, he was part of early NXT, like before it became like this big mainstream type thing. It was like really early NXT with Dusty Rhodes, and it was still developmental. Like explicitly, this was developmental. Like everyone sort of understood that before we became a type thing. And he was called way too early for NXT. Like he didn't do anything in NXT significantly, and they just called him up for. I still don't think we have a reason why
he's big.
he held up.
He's
I
big.
think it's just
He's got big muscles, Jason.
Yes. Well, we did have a report earlier this morning
we'll get into that with when Double Kato comes up on this list.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll just say that Vince McMahon isn't happy with some big guys who aren't performing that well. I don't know if Apollo Crews is in that list, but he possibly might be. But still, Apollo Crews got called way too early, and they obviously had nothing for him. They didn't know what to do with him, and they still don't really know what to do with him, even though he's a great worker. List off easy accomplishments from the indies here and there, and he worked in Dragon Gate USA. He was putting on great matches over there. It's like, oh, this guy's really athletic. He's really charming in some type of ways. You kind of saw that with Titus Worldwide, where he was paired up with Titus O'Neil. Like, oh, this guy's pretty charming. Like, he has personality. Like, it just seemed like he was this happy baby face type, but there's a lot more to him than that.
Yeah, I mean, for the thing with Crews is that, for starters, he doesn't have the worst name, but his indie name of Uha Nation was awesome and unique. And I always think that those guys should have those names. Apollo Crews was like this weird combination of Apollo Creed and Terry Crews, which is fine. There are people on this list that have worse names. We'll get into them later, but he was the guy who, when you first saw him, you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to be in WWE one day and he's going to be a big star, because he was so big and so agile. And he does have, I don't know if he's like the most charismatic guy, but you used a good word in saying charming, because I do think there is a little bit of charm there with him. He's a handsome guy. He's got a nice smile, which they maybe have overdone too much when he was just like guy who smiles.
Yeah.
His NXT run was really interesting because, he was kind of hyped up as being like a big addition to NXT, the way that they had hyped up Samoa Joe and Sami Zayn and Shinsuke Nakamura. And so he comes in and he basically just did mid-card work at NXT, never got really into the NXT title picture. And then he went up to the main roster, where he was one of like a lot of these guys, they get called up kind of hastily because we need new blood. And then there's not good plans for him, no real storylines, and then they just float around directionless. And he was directionless for a very long time. He's someone who I think actually has benefited from the pandemic even though I believe he missed a show didn't he miss a pay-per-view because he got COVID?
I don't know if that was the reason, but he did miss a show.
I think it was a pay-per-view, and it was a mysterious. He was supposed to wrestle for the U.S. title.
Yeah.
But he missed it. Yeah, you're right. We don't know if it's for the reason, so I shouldn't say it was because of COVID-19. But he's gotten more on television, and he's on Raw most weeks. But it does seem like he's kind of in the Ricochet role, where he feuded with Hurt Business forever, but it doesn't seem like he has real direction with his character or his storyline.
Yeah, irony is that they're really close friends. They used to be roommates together. I don't know if they still are now, but they used to be roommates, and so it's pretty ironic that those two are in the same place.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of close friends of Apollo Crews, my next pick on this list is Akira Tozawa. And Tozawa is someone who, just looking at this list right here, with the exception of Bobby Roode, Tozawa is somebody who was a very successful wrestler in a fairly large wrestling organization before deciding to come to WWE. He was very successful in Dragon Gate in Japan, working. I think if you don't know Dragon Gate, Dragon Gate's a pretty large promotion in Japan. They're not as big as New Japan, but Akira Tozawa worked many times in front of 5,000 to 8,000 people, in front of hot crowds, was always over. So he was very successful in Japan, which, it's not always going to translate over to the US, but he's so charismatic. And he had tons of charisma, which I think made him kind of stand out and made him attractive to WWE as opposed to a lot of the people in Dragon Gate who are excellent workers. But really very charismatic. Again, fell into the 205 live black hole where no one ever really emerges. And then his contribution on the main roster has been this ninja gimmick, which I think pops Vince backstage, and doesn't do really anything for anyone else. It's probably pretty racist. Like I don't want to. I don't really know if how to react to that other than saying that making the Japanese guy play a ninja is probably an outdated concept. Ninjas aren't really popular
Not
anymore. I
anymore.
feel like 15, 20 years ago, maybe Ninja Warrior kind of maybe helped it out, but I feel like ninjas used to be like, I guess more like universally thought of as cool.
Well, Vince McMahon lives in the past, so like
Yes.
whoever's cool 20 years ago is still cool to him.
Yes, that's actually a good point. And 20 years might be a little generous there. Uh, Given that Apollo Cruz's first name is based off of a movie character from uh, 40 years ago. But that's the Tozawa story. I don't have anything else to say other than that. I think he's charismatic and a good worker, and he deserves better.
Yeah, I mean, he's also was pretty popular in the US too. Dragon Gate guys came over to
Yeah, I mean,
PWG.
he was
They put
a
on great
known guy.
matches.
Yeah, I mean, he speaks pretty good English for a Japanese wrestler. I know that's obviously a hurdle for a lot of these guys, but
Yeah.
he spent some time, I think, living in the United States. I think he was training in the New Japan LA dojo, like where Samoa Joe trained
Mhm.
and a few other people of no change. So I think he's more familiar with the United States than I think than some of the other Japanese talent that have come over, and I don't think he's allowed to speak English on WWE television. But I remember actually seeing like an interview him and Apollo Crews were doing, and him and Apollo Crews I think were roommates at one time, and we're friendly from working in Dragon Gate and Dragon Gate USA together, and like. Tozawa speak like really good English, and I was like, "Oh god damn, this guy's going to be a star because I know he's charismatic and I know he's a good worker, and I didn't know he spoke this good English." But of course, that didn't really happen.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Who knows? I think he's still relatively young, and so maybe he can emerge from this 24/7 title
I don't
gimmick
know.
thing. But
I think he's kind of old. Let me try to think because I don't know how long. I gotta, if he was in that New Japan LA dojo, that means he started like at least 15 years ago. He's 35,
yeah, it's relatively
and
young.
he started in 2005, so I nailed that. Um, all right, who you got next?
All right, so next I have Grand Metalik, and so that's kind
Ah,
of
okay.
yeah, it's an interesting choice, but this guy's a big star in CMLL, winning a bunch of titles over there, and obviously with CMLL, they had a partnership with New Japan. They've had great, he comes over for the Best of Super Juniors, all those the tournaments and stuff like that, and he's always performed well. And he was in the Cruiserweight Classic title tournament with TJP, and you can make an argument, put an asterisk on that, saying, "Oh, well, they're the only guys who signed contracts in WWE, so that's why they're in the finals." But still, he was in the finals. Let's give him credit for that. Whether you want to put an asterisk on that or not. And he again part of the 205 Live type of deal, but still, he had an interesting run with the whole Lucha House Party type deal. Like again, whether you think it's good or bad, it was still something for them to put Kalisto, Lince Dorado, some other guys on this list. All together in a tag team and a trios team. And I think in another promotion that cares about trios sort of gimmicks, I don't know
Mhm.
gimmicks, but trios teams, I think that would work a lot better. But WWE, like they've historically not cared for any sort of trios titles or trios tag teams, and so I think that's what really hurt them. But there's a lot of potential there for Lucha House Party to be a very over act. Everyone loves to chant Lucha, and so that was over to some degree, because people like chanting it, but still, it was something. But yeah, it's something that's really stressed, and for a lot of people on this list, at least they had something to do.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Again, I'm going to mention it again. It's just like so many of these guys just have been in tag teams and different tag teams over the years, and that's kind of shows how how seriously WWE takes tag team division, which is not very, which is why so many of these guys on this list are just kind of guys who have been in multiple tag teams over the years, and that's pretty much the extent of what they've been able to do. I think Metalik's a great worker. I mean, like you said, he was a really good worker in Mexico, excellent worker when the junior heavyweight division for New Japan. I think he's the kind of guy that he does, so much cool stuff on, using the ropes and these kind of classic lucha libre stuff that you don't always see in American wrestling even today, which, there's so much more of lucha libre today that's in American wrestling than there used to be. But even then, he reminds me a bit of like a lot of Ray Phoenix. Like if you watch Ray Phoenix in AEW, and because Ray Phoenix is pushed and allowed to do stuff, like you see him, he's like just does weird stuff that looks cool that you just don't see anyone else doing, because unless you're watching a ton of lucha libre, you're missing out on that. So I think it's a good pick. I mean, he's definitely a really talented guy. I don't know how good he speaks English, which is probably an issue for him, getting a singles push or anything like that. But he's a good pick.
And also, I think Vince McMahon, other than Rey Mysterio, he seems to have a weird thing with guys wearing masks for whatever reason. You see, like Andrade, he unmasked. El Hijo del Fantasma, he unmasked as well. And so it seems like a weird thing for Vince McMahon. Other than Rey Mysterio, of course, he seems to be the exception for guys wearing masks.
The most successful guy. Maybe.
Exactly.
Well, there's some more lucha guys and Latin American guys on this list. I always thought that WWE has always actively wanted to push. They've always wanted the next Rey Mysterio or the next Eddie Guerrero, someone who is really popular with Latino fans. And they haven't done it, and I've always thought that a big part of that was that they kind of were very one-dimensional in how they push these guys. It's like they either gotta be like the mask-wearing luchador. He's like a superhero, which is what Rey Mysterio's gimmick was, which works when it's Rey Mysterio and maybe doesn't work when it's Sin Cara or someone else like that. Or they put they push Del Rio and they push like a bigger guy, and I just feel like there's a lot more room there for give me a strong Latino character who also feels like more of a regular person that people can relate to, and have it not just be like this masked luchador superhero that worked with Rey Mysterio. I don't know if it would work with every wrestler. I do like what Phantasma's done at NXT. That feels like a gimmick that feels it's influenced by Latino culture and Mexican culture, but also feels like a real guy. Like it feels like a good gimmick and a good character, but not so cartoony, not so over the top as like it's Lucha House Party. Look how wacky everyone is, which I don't think, I think that has a very limited appeal. So my next pick is, again, maybe a surprise to some people, is I am going with Mojo Rowley.
Oh, yeah. The hype man.
He doesn't get hype. He stays hype. Mojo is the walking example of maybe why the WWE Performance Center doesn't work as well as people would like it to do, because Mojo is not very good, and there's really no reason why he shouldn't be very good, because he is a sick athlete. He's an incredible physical athlete. He loves professional wrestling. By all accounts, he's a really dedicated, hardworking guy. Really wants to make it in wrestling, which is why he's stuck around for as long as he has. Mm-hmm. He's been around. He's been in WWE forever. He's been in NXT. He's been in development. He's been working at the Performance Center forever, and he's still not very good. But I still think if we can get him into a different environment, in my hypothetical wrestling promotion, where I am getting, Katsuri Shibata to come over and train these guys for me, or Lance Storm or someone like that, and Gato is my booker. I think there's more there, because I do think he has so much athletic potential, and that he has, he has moments where he shows that he has a lot of charisma. There was that famous promo he cut when he split up with Zack Ryder, and he basically cut a promo on his phone about, like, I don't know if you remember it or if the people at home remember it, but he was basically like doing a promo where he just has his phone out and he's just like kind of talking into it, and he's like talking about how like Zack Ryder went to Disneyland today and he doesn't care about being a competitor, and he's gonna get him in that ring, and he's like, I'm not gonna just beat you, I'm gonna hurt you. It was like really, really good, and it was very clear that it was so good because it wasn't scripted, and it was just this guy cutting a promo into his phone while he's working out, and I was like, goddamn, this guy who basically sucks on WWE television. He's this completely ridiculous character who's not a good wrestler. But there's still something there. There's something clearly there. And if he could just go somewhere else and he has the right mindset, I think he could achieve. So that's why I think I had him ranked higher than I think maybe some other people would.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Rob Gronkowski, not the best friend.
It
Leaving
didn't.
him, but...
Yeah, that's a big thing. Is that his golden ticket was that he was legitimately very good friends with Gronk, and unfortunately for him, it didn't work out with Gronk in WWE. But yeah, that definitely didn't help him.
And also, just another side thing, if Mojo ever leaves WWE, I'd be fascinated to hear his backstage stories on a podcast, to see all of his behind the scenes stories. I would be fascinated to learn about them because it seems because yeah, like you said, he's the guy who's been developmental for a very long time. Like this guy must have a ton of stories to tell on a podcast, and like obviously you probably can't tell them all on a WWE podcast. So like if he ever does leave, it'd be fascinating to hear all his behind the scenes stories.
He needs to do the recently released My 90 Days Are Up, Time to Go and Talk Is Jericho podcast.
Exactly.
All right, so who you got next?
All right, so next is I have Jinder Mahal. And Jinder is very polarizing. Some people love him, a lot of people hate him. His WWE title run, I guess it's fair to call it an experiment. Like they were trying to grab the Indian market with Jinder, even though he's born in Canada, but still, fairly successful, I guess, depending on what metrics you look at. But obviously, the fans did not like Jinder, and not the heel heat not like him. They legitimately did not like him. No. And when AJ won the title, they were legitimately happy because Jinder lost the title. More so that, and also AJ is very popular as well. But Jinder, another guy who's been developmental, like Mojo, for a very long time. And, he was part of many different enhancement groups. We'll call it that. Obviously with 3MB, which is now like sort of loved upon. But at the time, no one really liked 3MB.
No,
I think just nostalgia has
really helped. Total punchline.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a meme, right? It's a meme now, so it's helped.
Well, also Drew McIntyre has become a bigger star because of that, and so that helps. And also, you have on paper like Jinder's a world champion, so like that helps 3MB a little bit. But still, it's on paper. But the booking was very strange. They really wanted to push him. He gave it his all. I'll give him credit for that. Like, you could blame the booking, I would say, for Jinder, because every time he was out there cutting promos, he was giving it his all. He was, all the scripts he was given, he was trying his damnedest to try to get this over. And so he's obviously a very hard worker, has very strong work ethic. An injury, that kind of hurt him this year from any sort of trying to build any momentum. But still, even then, when he comes back, I don't really see any big storylines ahead of him.
Yeah, so Jinder I did not have ranked as highly as you on this list. And what's interesting is I put the list out on Twitter a few days ago, and we got a good amount of responses, I think like 40 or 50 responses to people saying, I asked them, here's the list, pick 5 guys you can start a promotion with. You can book them any way you want. And Jinder cracked the top 5 for a decent amount of people, more than I thought. My thing on Jinder is that I think we've seen it with him. We saw, I think there's a mystery to a lot of these guys about what would happen if they really got pushed. Jinder on this list, Jinder has gotten the most sincere push out of any of these guys. They went all in on that thing. They gave him a new nickname. They gave him the new music, the new outfit. They gave him the Singh brothers as manservants. Mm-hmm. They did all of these things for him. And it just didn't work. I thought it was really bad. I think it set back the WWE Championship, the fact that he had it and, didn't have good matches and didn't have interesting programs. And he worked hard. Like it's not like I don't want to just totally dump on him because I think that he gave it his all, but I don't see the natural talent there with him. And he didn't even get I think people forget about this with Jinder. They did a show in India, and the plan was to do 2 shows and 2 events in India. But the ticket sales were so bad that they only did 1 show, which was they had been able to do 2 shows a few years prior. Mm-hmm. So business in India theoretically went down based on the shows. And Jinder was in the main event against Triple H, and they just put Triple H over. And at the end, I think someone even asked them, why did Triple H go over? And they said, oh, Triple H's more popular, so he's going over and, send the crowd home happy. So it didn't even get it. He wasn't even that popular in India. it was a marketing experiment that unfortunately we wrestling fans were treated towards. So I don't have that high of opinion on. But you're right. If you wanted to say you had a WWE champion and you wanted to say you have that, I mean he's been. I don't know if he's the biggest name on this list. I mean, he is if you count like YouTube views or something like that. If you wanted to
Yeah.
really get a YouTube channel off the ground, you put a lot of Jinder in it because you get the YouTube views from India. But uh,
What's one of the things with Jinder is that like he was on Sheamus's like Celtic Warrior workouts a couple times, and he seemed really nice. Like that's just one of the things I have him high on the list. He seems like a good character, good high work ethic kind of guy, and so that's a nice person to have in a promotion.
mhm.
I've never heard a story about somebody having heat with Jinder. Like I've never heard anyone say, "Oh, Jinder sucks," or he's an a-hole backstage. Like he seems like a really nice guy.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there's anyone on this list here that we're like, I want to come out and just blame for that. It's their reason that they're part of this undercard draft. Like all of these people have worked very hard to get where they are, and a lot of them are extremely talented. So I don't want to like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to bash like saying these guys. It's these guys'
Mhm.
fault that they're so bad and they're directionless because it's not. This is a WWE problem, not an individual talent problem. So gonna try to pick things up here at least a little bit because I still got a lot of names left here, although. Um, the next person I had is Kalisto. I mean, this is kind of similar to your Grand Metal League pick. Obviously, they're in the stable together, but Kalisto's a really good worker. He was a name on the independents as Samurai Del Sol. I think he was kind of starting to kind of crack into like the more mainstream independent scene, like where he was going to be working more like PWG and Evolve shows when he got snatched up by WWE. Very talented high flyer. Has had some memorable like spots in WWE. He did the like where he climbed like along the roof of the elimination chamber a few years
Yeah.
ago. He did like
Hmm.
the Selena Del Sol, like the crazy like sliced bread or the shinobi, is that what it's called? I'm trying to think of the Japanese version name for that move, but he did like off the ladder like in one of the
Yeah.
Money in the Bank matches. Like really athletic guy, good talent. Speaks good English. I mean, he's from Chicago, so it's not like Grand Metalik where he's grasping the language, but
Hmm.
just kind of guy who's good talent but never really gotten a chance.
Yeah, pretty much. Obviously he's seems to be more iconic for the Botchamania clip of "Oh, I want to do good lucha things." Like that seems to be the only thing he's iconic for in terms of character and promos. Like I don't think anyone can recall an actual good Kalisto promo.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. All right, who you got next?
Along the same vein, Lindsay Dorado. I
Yep.
mean,
Okay.
he's
Who
obviously
you?
part of the same group. Sort of around the same. He's like 33, and so he still has a couple more years left of him. He's a Chikara guy, and so obviously very well trained. And he was another interesting part of the 205 Live guys because it's like, okay, where do they put him and what do they do with him? Because obviously, he has nicknamed the Golden Links, but still, it seems to be the only thing they've kept promoting from him. But yeah, he's a good high flyer, good worker. I never heard him talk before, to be honest, and that's kind of one of the problems. Like they never really gave those guys promo time. Um, and definitely he did seem to be on the third end of the Lucha House Party stable. Like if you want to rank him, like you put like probably Kalisto first, then Grand Metalik and Lindsay Dorado in terms of how WWE viewed them. Like I don't think WWE views Lindsay Dorado that well compared to Kalisto or Grand Metalik.
Yeah, and it's hard with the modernization of WWE style when it comes to in-ring work.
Hmm.
It used to be like Lindsay Dorado, like he's a good flyer, but there's so many good flyers on the roster now. Especially we've listed a bunch of Grand Metalik, Kalisto, Ricochet, um, you know even some people like Seth Rollins and stuff. These guys do like really big high spots. AJ Styles, still. And so it's harder for guys like Lindsay Dorado to stand out because if they come up there and they hit a shooting star press, it's like, okay, everyone likes a shooting star press, but it's not as like memorable as it was maybe 15 years ago when you had one guy on the roster who would do that. It's just, I think so. I think for the high flyers, it sometimes hurts them that they don't stand out as much when there's already so many dives and high spots and stuff being done, especially if it's being done by bigger stars.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm just curious, like, does this guy have creative ideas that he's pitching that aren't being heard from from WWE office. That'd be kind of interesting to know about. Like, like he has all these ideas for his character because yeah, he probably does understand that like, hey, I need to stand out in some sort of way because my high flying moves kind of just blend in with everyone else. And so, we don't know that, he could be pitching ideas that aren't being heard from WWE's office.
Mm-hmm.
So who do you have next?
So my next pick, I'm going with Titus O'Neil. And when you mentioned Jinder, you said everyone likes Jinder. He's a good person to have as a representative of your promotion. Titus O'Neil I'm picking him solely based on like the PR work he can do for me. It's WWE does, it's well covered by him. Titus O'Neil, very unselfish human being, has done a ridiculous amount of charity and stuff in Central Florida. Just like a good dude to have around. His in-ring career is weird to me because I always thought, he's got a great look. He's tall, great physique. Legit athlete, played, a little bit of professional football after playing football at the University of Florida. He's not good in the ring really, but I feel like you could work around that. He's not terrible either. And, it helps because he's so physically imposing. And I always thought he was really charismatic, and I think he's a good talker. And I kind of weird. He never really got a serious push. He got, he had the thing going with the primetime players, which was good, and it capitalized on some of his skills and hid some of his weaknesses. But I always just thought he was a guy that could do more because I always thought he was a good talker and he's got a great look. And usually WWE pushes those guys harder than they do. And he's just a great person for the company.
Yeah, Titus Worldwide was pretty fun, but obviously WWE didn't really care about it because I think a lot of those segments were like exclusively on like online on WWE.com or on YouTube. And so that was really hard to get over, but to get that stable over as much as they could have, because Dana Brooke was really good in Titus Worldwide as like their secretary type,
the stats
and
person.
So but it wasn't seen. It wasn't seen a lot by a lot of people. That was the problem.
Yeah, I look at him and he's someone that I thought would get a better crack at it. He's 43, so this is it for him. I just thought, he's got what Vince would like to see in a wrestler, and he's like an outstanding human being. And it just seems to me that he would, maybe deserve a better crack at a serious singles run, but it just never came for him. And, I think he should be I think they should use him on commentary more. I think he should be one of the guys on Raw or SmackDown because I think it keeps him in the spotlight, excellent representative of your company, and he's a really good talker, and he's intelligent, and he comes across really well on television. So I'm a big Titus fan, to be honest. He's got a limited upside, but I'd be happy to have him in my promotion just for a lot of other reasons beyond just, putting on good matches.
Yeah, for sure. Like you want an Adam Pearce type official, like Titus O'Neil would be perfect for that.
Yeah,
that'd be realistic for him too.
Yeah,
it's very realistic to have him as an official because he's obviously very jacked, and so he can push around people whenever he wants. And so it's more realistic than Adam Pearce going out. I know Adam Pearce is a wrestler, but still, it's just more realistic to have Titus out there being the WWE official, breaking up fights.
What a weird career Adam Pearce has had. Just like he goes from like, independent, tough guy, scrap iron, Adam Pearce, and then he like gets signed by WWE. It's like, okay, yeah, he'll be on as a trainer, and now he's just like this weekly figure as the authority figure. Like he's like the role that like Eric Bischoff was in 2003 or something like that. Just a really unexpected. I would not have expected that from him. All right, who you got next?
All right, so this one I'm reaching for upside. I'll say that. Give me Dabba-Kato.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is very reaching for upside. And so he's he's a performance center guy. He was signed in 2016. He had a minor football career. I know he signed with the Vikings. I think it's just for the practice squad over there. But he's obviously a very big guy, as we saw in Raw Underground. And he was sort of getting a push on Raw Underground, but obviously Raw Underground, it kind of just ended without any sort of on-screen reason. I know behind the scenes, I think there's some there's some COVID precautions they wanted to take, and that's why Raw Underground sort of ended. But on screen, we never really got a reason why these guys were sort of missing from television. But he's still relatively young, 31 years old, and he just needs time to develop. And I guess I referenced the Vince McMahon report, the report about Vince McMahon throwing a fit over these bigger guys that can't work, and I'm very much going to assuming that Dabba-Kato is one of those guys that Vince McMahon loves his look, but he cannot work in the ring. And that's not his fault. 2016, that was like 4 years ago. And so he's still developing as a wrestler, as a talent. And so, he's coming from the football world as well. And he's coming in kind of late in the pro wrestling game. And so he just needs time to develop and find a character for himself.
Well, yeah, I mean, when the report came out, and his name has been mentioned, I don't know if you saw the update that I think Mike Johnson of PWI Insider mentioned that he's one of the guys that they mentioned as like guys who need more work, and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, he hasn't been wrestling that long, and it wasn't like he was a regular NXT television, he was, I think he did it when Leo Rush was there. I believe they were doing a gimmick where like, Leo Rush was kind of like tag teaming with him, and it was kind of like this really big guy and this really small guy, who were working together. But with him, like, you're right, like upside, you're going like this guy, he's legit 6'9", legit 350 plus pounds, and I've heard that like they do like those like NFL Combine-esque like stuff with the performance center, seeing like who can do the most reps and who can run this. Like he like kills it in that. Like he's a legit athlete. Weird athletic career. He's from Poland. He's he was just look. I'm reading his Wikipedia page, but he has a Polish mother and a Nigerian father. His full name is Babatunde Lucas Ayagbusi. And he was going by Babatunde before he was Dabakato, which I prefer Babatunde. I think it's like, okay, oh God, it's Babatunde, here he comes, and it's just this enormous guy. But yeah, like Vince, they called him up early because he's big and they want to see a big guy, and then it turns out that he needs more seasoning, so he gets chewed out by it. But it's like I said on Twitter, it's like the steak you pulled out of the oven early is still cold. That shouldn't be a surprise. These guys need time. So yeah, it's a fine pick for Dabaka. I mean, we're kind of, we're going to go through some of these names, and there's not like a ton of.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair. I'm going with Bo Dallas as my next pick. Bo is another guy who's been around forever. I think this is what he has. This is what he is in WWE at this point. It's not going to change for him. His name came up in some people's Twitter replies, which I was pretty surprised by, that he would crack some people's top five. So some people are probably like, why aren't they talking about Bo? But Bo's another guy, like I said, he's just been around forever. This looks like this is what it's going to be for him. I think he has charisma. I think that he's tried to get stuff over. I don't know if it's been the best material to get over, but he's put in a real effort, with the Bo leave and the Bo train and the stuff with Curtis Axel and all that stuff like that. I mean, he's not bereft of talent. He's just someone who's never really maybe gotten the right kind of opportunity on the main roster. It's kind of funny to think that like NXT as a brand kind of launched and he was like a key star and he was the champion. And that, you look at it now and what NXT would become in a few years and even what it is today, like, wow, like Bo Dallas was the NXT champion. Like now I don't think he sniffs that title picture, and because it's become such more prestigious, and they only really give it to the biggest names they have. But it's been an interesting career for Bo. I just, this is what he is in WWE. So it's hard to really think that I don't see, he isn't like if Bo Dallas popped up in AEW, like I don't think I would be that intrigued, as opposed to like if Chad Gable popped up, or even really like Mojo, to be honest. Like if Mojo popped up, I'd be more interested in seeing what he could do outside of WWE than Bo. But that's just my opinion on Bo.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously has the tools. He's a rotunda. He's brothers with Bray Wyatt, and so I think a lot of people have been fantasy booking him with Bray Wyatt in some type of way. I don't know if that's a WWE thing, why they haven't done that, or whether Bo Dallas, it's his right to, hey, I want to do this on my own. I don't want to rely on my brother. But still, at some point, with where he's at in his career, maybe if there's an opportunity for him to pair up with his brother Bray in some type of way, I don't know what that would be, especially now with the Fiend. But still, like he's grasping at straws right now in terms of creative.
Yeah, I mean but here's the problem with Bo is just. At one time, like when he first came out from NXT, if you wanted to be like, oh yeah, we're going to put him in the Wyatt family, like fine, that makes sense. But he's been around so long. and he has been kind of reduced to just being a jobber the entire time. That if you were to put him with the Wyatt family or put him with Bray, to me, he'd just be like that wouldn't do any Bray any favors because he's teaming up with this guy who's a complete jobber and has been presented as a loser for the last 5 years, which isn't Bo's fault. Like again, this is a WWE problem, not necessarily an individual talent problem, but I don't really see what that would do for Bo. So we got, by my count, we have one, two, three. I have 4 names left on my list. So we got some real choices to pick from. Who you got?
I only have I don't think I have 2 or 3 names left on
Okay,
one of the lists that you posted.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
When we get to
it. All right. So my next pick is Chasing Upside once again. Maybe these guys could be a tag team. Arturo Ruas.
Okay.
Give me some Arturo Ruas, another developmental type guy, another Raw Underground type guy. But still, let's put him and Del Maqueda in a tag team. Let's let these guys work together.
Who's the worker
these guys
in that tag team?
That's a good question.
You got to put. Here's what you do. Yeah, you've got to put Kate. You put Dabba-Kato with Cesaro, and you put Ruas with Robert Roode. So you get them the guys you work with, because that's basically how they use Roode and Cesaro.
But yeah, well, what surprised me was like this guy was signed in 2015, and he has been training the Performance Center since 2016, and obviously, yeah, he's just been developmental for a very long time. He has some legit background in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and all like MMA type stuff, and so he's like a legit like fighter in real life. But just I guess the problem with that is just sort of translating that onto pro wrestling. Everyone's done it in very unique type ways. Obviously, Shayna, she's really leaned into that. So like Sonya Deville, like the way she's transitioned her MMA style into pro wrestling is very unique. And so obviously he has lots of examples to look from to sort of transition his MMA jiu-jitsu style into pro wrestling. And obviously he's brought into Raw Underground for that reason. Because he is a legit fighter and I worked in that Fight Club sort of atmosphere. And so that was sort of interesting, but at the same time, like I said before, Raw Underground sort of just ended with a whimper, at least on screen.
Yeah, there was no real creative there, which is kind of why some of these guys are on this list. If Raw Underground was still going on, or had a logical kind of story progression, someone like Dabba-Kato, we probably wouldn't be on this list because he'd have creative direction and he'd be shown on TV each week. Yeah, who else is interesting? Kind of guy for them. It's hard to kind of compare. So he basically, like you said, he had amateur wrestling and jiu-jitsu experience, and then he kind of signed immediately with WWE. So he's a WWE Performance Center guy. He's not someone who was trained by outside of WWE. He was kind of like one of those athletes that they bring in, just like they bring in college football players or track stars or fitness models or whoever. They bring them in to and have them train with or go to these tryouts along with more experienced independent wrestlers. And he got signed, and he's one of those guys who like did a lot of Evolve shows when Evolve was still around, and I've seen him actually a couple of times because when Evolve would run in Melrose, Massachusetts, I had seen him at a couple of shows, and they always protected him. They always had him do short matches, and they had him come out wearing his gi, and he would beat people with submissions, and it was very much like a shooter gimmick where this guy's a legit guy and he's not going to do your pro wrestling. He's going to come out here and kick your ass because this guy's legit, and he is legit. I'm looking at his Wikipedia page right now. He wrestled in he finished 4th in the 2011 Pan American Games. It says, again, this is Wikipedia. This could be from WWE's website, for all I know, is where they're getting this information. But it says for 17 years, he was an unbeaten freestyle wrestling champion in Brazil. That sounds like a lot. He's 39, which is really old. He had this whole athletic career before coming to WWE. But he's an interesting guy. I think that there's sometimes like I don't know, like there's this image that people who are shooters and have like a shooting vibe because they're legit, that they're better at professional wrestling than they probably really are. I think that happens a lot with some people who lack experience, but it's masked by the idea that they're, legit. So the people think that they might be actually kind of better than I think they really are. And I think with Uwas, he's a guy that's going to need more time and experience, and it's hard in the pandemic to get that because if you're not wrestling on television, you're not wrestling on SmackDown or Raw. Those Evolve doesn't exist anymore. They're not, so he doesn't have those shows to work on. NXT's not doing house shows like the what do they call it? I think it's called the Pineapple Circuit, or just like how they would do like the Florida circuit of where a lot of the people who aren't on TV would get reps. So he's not getting those. So it's tough. And he got called up to the main roster. He was part of the Raw draft. But we basically haven't seen him, so I don't think, has he wrestled the match on television, like on real television? I think he might be doing like main event stuff. Let me actually look that up because I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's just main event, nothing on Raw. Not even the 24/7 stuff. And so you really aren't really using it.
Yeah, I mean, it's good if he's not doing that. That's kind of the once you're part of the group that's chasing our truth, you're kind of set in stone if that's where you're going to be. So yeah,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, he's working. He's been actually on NXT. He did appear. Yeah, I was gonna say. I thought he did. He's back. So maybe he's back in NXT. I don't know. I got this list from WWE's website, just looking at people on the main roster. But his last match was on November 18th on an episode of NXT. He lost to Kushida. So that's what's going on in Arturo Ruas. So I've got 3 names left here, and so Jason apparently does not have as many names as I do. But we'll just talk about the last name anyway.
Okay.
That we're missing. But so right now I have Tucker, and Tucker is kind of interesting because obviously Otis was considered the star of that tag team because he had a unique look and was very charismatic. But kind of lost in the shuffle was I thought that Tucker was a good worker who is legit great athlete and really big and could really work. And so I think there was a lot of stuff to work with there. I think if they had held a Brawl for All in 2020 and it was just filled with a bunch of people who were doing nothing, that Tucker would be a good bet to win it because he's so big and has a legit kind of shooter background as well. But, company's never done anything with him. They did that split up with Otis for no reason. So it didn't help anybody. It hurt both of them. It definitely hurt Tucker, and I think it hurt Otis as well. And then, as soon as they broke up, and I think Tucker was on an episode of Raw, I think, and he basically just had like these crappy tights that just said Tucker on them, and he basically did a quick job, and it's like, God, they're done. They're done with him, and I don't really know why, because I think he could be an asset athletically, and he's not super experienced, and he's already a pretty good worker, in addition to his physical size. So I think he'd be an okay person to have.
Yeah, I mean, with the Otis storyline of Mandy, Tucker was kind of just lost in the shuffle for whatever reason, even though they're still a tag team at that point. But, they just felt he was a third wheel, and they didn't want a third wheel in that storyline.
Yeah, and they needed to break them up, I guess, to get the Money in the Bank briefcase off of Otis, because they should have never put it on him in the first place. But it just, what a mess that whole thing was with Tucker and Otis. And again, didn't help anybody, and Otis is one of those names that apparently needs to go back down to NXT and learn how to work again. So Tucker did not make it on that name. Maybe either they just don't care enough about him or they think he's good enough, but he was not one of the big guys getting punished. All right, so do you have a name left?
I have one more name left.
Okay, so there's a difference. So who is your last pick?
All right, so pretty much Mr. Relevant for me is Riddick Moss. And so Riddick Moss, he is currently out with a knee injury, and so that's kind of why he's not really doing anything. But even then, before that, he wasn't really doing anything before his knee injury. But he's 31 years old. Kind of just looking at his Wikipedia page,
Yeah, what do you have?
Take that for what you will. But apparently he was contacted Jim Ross to get into WWE, and so Jim Ross gives you a recommendation. Like, I know Jim Ross, probably his track record for finding talent is, like everyone else's, sometimes you hit, sometimes you don't, but still Jim Ross is very well respected. And so if he thinks you're good or has potential, like that has to be worth something.
Yeah, he's not from Oklahoma,
And then
I think.
yeah, he's a Minnesota guy because
Yeah.
yeah, he played football over in Minnesota,
Yeah,
and he was
legit athletic career. I mean,
yeah,
he
and
went to
then he
camp.
signed with WWE in like 2014 ish, and 2015. And he's been performance center at NXT. He had a tag team with Tino Sabatelli. Tino's no longer in NXT and WWE. I think he did some stuff with AEW. I think Dark, a couple
Yeah.
of matches over there. But still, for Riddick Moss, he was sort of briefly in the tag team of Mojo, but then Mojo turned on him, or like well, the other way around. I don't remember how that happened, but then all of a sudden they start feuding for the 24/7 title. And of course, as you mentioned before, 24/7 title being part of that scene isn't always the best for your career. It's kind of a career killer in some sort of ways. And so hopefully Riddick Moss, he recovers from his knee injury, and he probably the best thing for him is to go back to developmental in NXT and build his way back up, because there's nothing for him on the main roster unless they want to just put him back in the 24/7 title scene. Maybe Mojo wins it, and then he'll just screw Mojo when he comes back. And it's like, oh, it's Riddick Moss. He's
Like
back.
who? Yeah, I know,
And he
right?
screwed Mojo.
So the thing with it, so two quick things about Riddick Moss. Like a lot of these guys, like Mojo and like Baba Tunde or Dabba Kato, you know, a guy who came to WWE from football, legit athletic background,
Mm-hmm.
has been in the developmental for a number of years, just never really has clicked with it, never really, I guess, gotten it in the way that maybe some other people would. So there's not much to say about him. He hasn't really been on television. He hasn't even really been on NXT that much, and he's been in the company since 2014. Riddick Moss is like the definition of the terrible NXT name generator that they have down there, where these guys
Yeah.
just have names that you will not remember, but are like just weird names, so they're not good names. And one of the notable things about Riddick Moss, I guess according to his Wikipedia page, again going by this, that he adopted the new ring name Riddick Moss as a tribute to former NFL player Randy Moss, which I guess makes sense if he's a Minnesota kid, but I would have never gotten that. Like, like,
No.
I guess
Like
the last
what?
name is there, but it's like Riddick Moss. Like, why is his first name Riddick? Like, whose name is Riddick? He's a victim
I
of the NXT name generator.
It's probably a reach, but maybe the Vin Diesel movie, The Chronicles of Riddick.
Chronicles, half Chronicles. How did people come up? These are stupid names. I don't know. I don't know what my wrestling name would be, but yeah, maybe. Like that's the only time I've ever heard the word Riddick.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
kind of a reach, but I can't think of anything else.
but I would have never like been like, oh yeah, Riddick Moss. It's kind of like a tribute to Randy Moss. Like it is. I don't know. All right, so I guess the mystery person. I don't know. I must not have sent this over to you in the list of names I put, which is why you have it wrong. But I had Humberto Carrillo on this list.
Oh, okay.
Uh, I had him a little bit higher than I'm not picking. He was not last on my list. He just happens to be last here I'm picking because some of the people got picked otherwise. But Humberto Carrillo, I mean, another guy like kind of like Apollo Crews who has been pushed here and there and has been allowed to win matches and contend for the United States Championship. But again, not really anything serious, no real direction. Just kind of come in as a guy on the roster. Again, kind of like the Lucha House Party guys, is a guy who comes from a Lucha Libre background and can do some impressive stuff in the ring. But when you have all of these relatively faceless people doing these moves in high spots in the ring, it becomes much more challenging um, to kind of stand out individually with someone like Humberto Carrillo. So I have him here. Like I don't think Humberto Carrillo's bad or anything. And he actually has been pushed to a certain degree, but I just don't know what that upside is for him and like how I should evaluate him that much.
I mean, he still has, a lot of years left ahead of him. He's our
Yeah.
age,
Yeah, I
basically.
was gonna say, how
And
old is
so
he? I thought he's like
he,
24. He's really young.
he was
He's
born in
25.
95.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
super young. And so like he has a ton
super,
of in him.
super young for WWE. I mean, that's the thing is kind of like and kind of one of the things just that's kind of wrapping up the draft here, but just looking at this list of guys, it's like it's not like a lot of these guys are young. Like we got a lot of
For the
guys
most part, yeah.
yeah, I mean you could say like, oh, okay, these guys have bright futures because they're so young, and Humberto Carrillo, he might be the youngest guy here, Actually, he probably is. Now I think about it, but we're talking about a lot of guys who are over 35, and in the case of some of these guys are over 40. And I didn't want to put like R-Truth on here because, to be frank, R-Truth does have creative direction. Um, but he's a guy who's well over 40. But there's roles for everyone in the company. But I think all of these guys here could be doing more. And for whatever reason, sometimes they're injured, sometimes they're still relatively new to wrestling and still trying to gain more experience. Some of them are too short. Some of them don't have charisma. Some of them, or are believed to not have charisma. Some of them are. Their guys are on here for different reasons, but I think what makes them interesting and why I wanted to kind of do this and talk about them was that I think that we both agree that all of them can be capable of doing more if given the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, just as a closing thought on just the whole like draft in general, of just all the names, it's just that like it kind of shows that like WWE, they have a certain number of guys that they want to push and they have a direction for, and everyone else is kind of just left to their own devices. It's not really like any other promotion where you could pitch something or get over doing something else. Like obviously with the third party edict stuff, like you can't do anything else on another platform. It's just it's really tough to try to get yourself over in that corporate environment.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's just roster bloat. Like WWE is very conscious about releasing talent because they don't want that talent to go to other places and achieve, because it hurts their business by elevating competitors. I mean, boy, do they, I'm sure they regret that they released Cody Rhodes when he asked for his release, because
Sure.
that came back to hurt them, and that's why we saw them, pearl clutch on to FTR, even though they didn't really want to do anything with them. So there's a lot of these guys who would probably in other time periods, some of these guys have probably asked for their release. I'm trying to think if there's anyone off the top of the head that we know for a fact has. I don't think there is on this list, but there are guys out there who might have asked for their release and have their eye on going, and maybe they're waiting for their contract to expire, or maybe they're comfortable, working for WWE. Maybe they're comfortable just getting that paycheck each week and not being asked to do too much. And it's not a bad gig if you can get it, obviously. But I think as fans and as people who want to see people achieve, we would like to see people be allowed to reach their potential. And that's just not happening a lot. And part of that is just the roster's too big, and there's not these kind of opportunities even on WWE television. We talked a lot about things like 205 Live, and just like a lot of these guys are doing good work, have done good work on 205 Live, but those guys aren't real stars, or those guys aren't real wrestlers, or whatever that kid said in front of you.
Yeah.
That's just, I mean, that's the reality is like,
Yep.
205 Live and WWE Main Event, those aren't going to help these guys get over, because they just don't have the kind of footprints that impacts WWE at all. And, that's WWE's fault. If they like, if they took 2 minutes on every Raw show, 2 minutes out of that 3-hour block, to just show some highlights from main events in 205 Live, and just said, this is what's happened on main events, and they, you could start something. You could be like, there's stuff happening if you watch it. It's like, Tucker's on a 5-match winning streak. He beat so-and-so again. And then, like, if you have Tucker come out on Raw, like the next week, and he's wrestling Apollo Crews, or he's wrestling, I don't know if Apollo Crews is on Raw or not. I can't remember who's on what. If he's wrestling Matt Riddle, you could at least, fans who are watching Raw will at least be like, oh, that's Tucker, and the announcers go, Tucker's been on a win streak on main events, and they'll at least add some more legitimacy, and you'd be like, oh, maybe they're going to push Tucker. Maybe this guy's got some momentum going. I'm now more interested in this match, when I think it would otherwise just be a squash match. So that would help. I mean, I don't know, but that's asking a lot. Just main event's been around forever, and I think this is, what they're going to do with it. But that's it. Like I said, it was a fun exercise, I think, for everyone. We appreciate everyone who listens, and if you want to leave any comments, any questions, or anyone that you thought should have been in this draft that was in this draft. I know I could have put Shinsuke Nakamura in here. I could have put, Aleister Black is interesting, actually, because he's someone who has apparently fallen off of the face of the earth. Obviously, he's married to Selena Vega, or is at least in a relationship. They're married, yeah. So He's a guy that could have been on this list. I think he would have been an interesting person to talk about because he's someone whose career has been very strange since coming up to the main roster. And there's other names that could be on here. Like I said, we could have threw in women if we wanted to. I think. I don't know. I don't know what my take would be on if I think like Tucker is better than Billy Kay or vice versa. I don't know how I would really do that, but that's it. Thanks a lot again. We appreciate everyone for listening. Jason, you got anything else?
No, just I think just one big thing to take away from this is that the Performance Center is very interesting in how they develop talent, and there's not really a consensus on whether it's a success or not. And I think it's really interesting to think about. And I think just one big thing to take from this podcast is that think about the center. Think about all the people they sign in those pictures, even the recent signings, the recent class. Just think about that and just how there's always people there, a lot more people than I think people understand. There's a ton of people in the performance. I don't think people understand that, and which guys are they pushing? What are they doing over there? It's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean there are football players and athletes who have never appeared on NXT television that are living in Orlando and working there and training there, and we don't know if we will ever see them. And they constantly, I mean, they're in this big rush to get as much talent as possible because they're in competition now with these other companies, especially AEW, when it comes to signing these guys. I mean, it feels like every week there's a story where someone who works for AEW is saying like, I appeared on AEW Dark, and then all of a sudden I got a call from Triple H saying, "Hey, would you like to come to Orlando?" And it's a very competitive atmosphere, which is good for the talent for being able to make a living. I think it's good for someone like who is it, like Anthony Green, who just signed with WWE for it's good for him to work for WWE instead of having to grind on the indies, and he's able to work a full-time job, and now he's getting the opportunity at least to maybe one day make it to Raw or SmackDown, right? But you're right, there's so many names in front of these people, and NXT has set up, the NXT television show has set itself into a point where it has such a certain standard and is now relying on the same stars year after year as opposed to having a consistent churn that created more opportunities for newer people, that it's tough to get on, to crack the NXT show when really, if you're taking it as developmental at face value, they should just let anyone wrestle on NXT because it's developmental and it shouldn't matter if the matches are necessarily good. You just want to let people get reps in, but that's not the case in NXT. You have this extremely high standard, and you can't take like a Riddick Moss type and just like, oh yeah, Riddick Moss is going to wrestle like this match at a takeover show. The standard is too high to let rookies learn what they need to learn. So it's a very interesting dynamic. I mean, we could probably do a whole thing about like looking at the Performance Center and looking at the WWE trained talents and how successful they've been. But that's pretty much it. This went longer than I thought, but I think it was a fun exercise for everyone. And thank everyone for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, yell at us. Tell me I'm stupid for drafting for drafting. Bo Dallas too late or whatever. Appreciate everyone listening, and thanks a lot, and everyone have a good weekend.